everyone. Thank you once again for joining myself and Sport Singapore today for Yoga for Runners. You may not be a competitive runner, you may not be a fast runner, you may just be a jogger, but in any case, you're going to be using the same muscles. And if you do it repeatedly, very often, it's a great thing you're exercising often, but that also means that you may have more repetitive stress and tension in certain areas if you don't stretch enough. And the thing with yoga is we focus a little bit more on flexibility of your muscles as well as the mobility of your joints. So, in working with flexibility and mobility through yoga to complement what you do in your running, it is going to help you to be able to run for a lot longer and sustain a lot less repetitive strain. So, it's great rehab or prehab. Let's begin. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit of warming up movements first. Okay, and I love lunges because of how it helps to stretch out the hip flexors, which tend to get used a lot, all right, when you take the next step for your walk or your runs. So we're going to stretch that muscle out by taking a small step back, bend that knee, and we come back up. All right, let's do that again. So for runners, that is one muscle that is pretty tight in particular. All right, and 3, and exhale. So you don't have to do a very big step. 4 and out. And we are just warming up those muscles that we're going to be stretching a bit further in a short while. All right, let's do just 3 more here, okay? And exhale, 2 more. And up. So what I'm trying to do here is to keep my spine more upright as I take those steps back. And we're going to switch legs now. So 8 times on that right leg as well. And this repeated movement here is going to help me warm up the hip flexor, like I mentioned earlier, but it also helps me to warm up my hip joint. All right, exhale to come back. And 4, and up. And as a runner myself, I do know that these stretches and movements are very beneficial for runners, okay, because I can feel the difference myself. All right, let's do 3 more here. All right, inhale back and exhale forwards. 2 more times back and forwards. One last one, back and forwards and stop. All right, shake your legs out. So now that your hips and your hip flexors are a lot more cooled down, we're going to start to go into your first few stretches. Okay, so let's come into a kneeling position first. Now, for many of you who find that it's very painful for you to be kneeling on the ground, please have a towel or a cushion handy. We will start off in a kneeling position, and you are going to have your knees on that towel or cushion already. The other thing you can do is to also fold up your mat one more time. So now you have 3 layers, 1, 2, 3, instead of just 1. Okay, so use those options if they're available for you. All right, see what works better for you. So now that I'm in a kneeling position, I'm going to step my right foot forwards, and this is going to affect and stretch the front of the left hip flexor, the left psoas muscles a lot more than the right side. Right side, we are actually going to just bend that knee and then we go back. All right, let's do that again. Just 3 more times and back. 2 more times and back. 1 more time and we hold it here. Notice that I'm keeping my spine upright. Okay, so I'm going to prop my hands on my front thigh to help me enable my spine to be more upright in case I lean forwards, right? Because the moment I lean forwards, I'm not going to feel that stretch as effectively as it ought to be anymore. All right, so keep your spine more upright, chest facing front, eyes looking forwards as you sink your hips forwards and down. How long we're going to stay here in this stationary pose, this static movement here, is about 8 to 10 breaths, right? If you can, just time yourself, right? Put a timer there. Stay for about a minute, okay? Maybe 2 minutes if you can. The longer you stay, the deeper the stretch, right? But you don't try too hard. I've mentioned this so many times in my videos, okay? When you try too hard in your stretches, it backfires on you, okay? We're going to hold it here for 4 more breaths because you create more tension when you try too hard. And the thing is, we are trying to stretch. So when you relax, it makes more sense. And it will help you to be able to go deeper into your stretch as well. Let's hold it here for just 1 more breath, yeah? And then very slowly coming back up. Very nice. All right, let's take that step back and we're going to switch it over to your left foot, stepping forwards. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle your foot towards the front. And then let's go into a dynamic movement first, all right? Forwards and back, 3 more times. And this kind of helps to lubricate the hip joint also. Every time we run, every time we jog, right, there's going to be a lot of impact on that hip joint, your ankles, your knees, and your hip joint. Forwards and we hold. Once again, both hands are resting on top of your thigh to help you stay more upright in your spine, right, so you don't lean forwards. Now, allow your hips to sink forwards towards that front heel gradually. There is no rush, all right? The moment you rush, like I said, you go too far too soon, that stretch is not as effective as it will be, all right? So holding it there for another 4 more breaths. Noticing if you're tensing up your shoulders unnecessarily. So we only use what's involved in that movement, in that stretch, and try to switch off what's not involved, right? So a little bit more mindfulness in the way that you hold your stretches here. 1 more breath, or even when you do your movements, right? And then very slowly, we're going to shift the weight back, and we're going to come back into that kneeling position once again. The other thing about running is we tend to swing our arms forwards and back, right? We tense up the shoulders a lot and the front of our arms a lot when we're into our runs, which is why sometimes when you go for long distance runs, you're going to feel that tightness or that tiredness on your biceps when you rest your arms down. And it is so difficult to pick up your arms again after that, isn't it? All right, so let's come into a seated position first. I'm going to let the legs rest for a bit. I'm going to have my hands walking back and I'm going to bend my elbows here, all right? So I'm going to stretch the front of my shoulders first, okay? Holding it there. I'm going to stay there for another 4 more deep full breaths. Of course, the more you can bend your elbows, the deeper stretch you're going to find occurring around the front of your shoulders and your chest as well, all right? Stay right there for 2 more breaths. 1 more breath. So it's just natural breathing when we are stretching here. Breathe in a relaxed fashion. Okay, now we're going to keep your knees bent, feet are hip width distance apart. Now I'm going to walk my hands in a bit more towards me, and this time I'm going to turn my fingers in towards the direction of my feet. I'm going to lift it up into a tabletop position. Here's where I feel that stretch across the front of my arms, right? The biceps, right? Looking up towards the ceiling or looking forwards, all right? I'm going to try to not drop my head back, especially for those with neck issues. If it doesn't bother you, yeah, by all means go ahead, right? But if you tend to compress the back of your neck, I'd rather you look forwards instead. Push into the ground strongly with both hands. You're going to be stretching your biceps while working on several core muscles here. So the thing about running is we use the muscles on the front part of our body a lot. We don't use the back as much. So here's where you're using several back muscles. You're using your back, your hips, you're using your back of your thighs as well, using your buttocks, right? So holding it out here for 1 more breath. And then very slowly, go ahead and bend your hips to lower the bum down. Very nice. And you should feel like a after effect of stretching the biceps here. All right, let's come into pigeon pose next. I'm going to have my right leg bent in front and the left leg goes back. Now, this is a very, very, very important stretch I find for for runners, okay? Because when we run, we activate the IT band a lot, all right? So this connective tissue gets really stressed, really strained, and if you're not doing stretches like what we're about to do, you can actually experience pain or numbness or tingling sensation or electric shocks anywhere from the low back to the back of the hips, outside of the hips, outside of the thighs, outside of the knees, and outside of the lower leg, right? That's how long that nerve that gets affected is, right, if you don't stretch enough after your runs, right? So by having your right leg in front, I'm going to tilt your hips now, right? So right hip, left hip are level. And for many of you, you already feel a very intense stretch along the outside of your right hip, okay? Or maybe even outside the right thigh. You notice that my foot is pretty close to my hip. You'll see in photos that many people will have their foot go all the way to the front. Unfortunately, that is physically impossible for many people, for a start at least, okay? Maybe forever. So most of you might even have your leg very close to the thigh and you already feel a stretch here to the outside of your hip, or even slightly closer towards your hip, right? Wherever you are, just make sure that you can feel the stretch to the outside of your hip for whichever leg is on top, right? Now, if this is already enough for you, the stretch feels quite intense, stay here or come onto your forearms, right? So how long will we hold in this pose here? 8 to 10 breaths, right? So if you want to stay longer, like I said, stay for about a minute or two, but have your timer there so that you can stay for an even amount of time on both sides, right? So doing this stretch here is going to stretch several muscles around the hips outside of your thighs, but mostly affecting the IT band area, okay? Your sciatic nerve. Hold it here for another 3 more breaths. 2 more. He really enjoys laying down by my mat whenever I'm teaching. 1 more breath. Don't forget to do a Shavasana at the end of your stretches, right? What he's demonstrating. Okay, now to come back, we're going to slowly prop ourselves up on our hands and then sweep that left leg towards the front, and we're going to sweep your right leg back. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, stretch your back leg further behind you, and then assess if you need to adjust your foot further forwards or back, but keep your hips level, okay? Right hip, left hip are level. And then we're going to slowly, if it's available for you, come on down to your forearms. All right, holding it there, 8 to 10 breaths. So we're just going to hold it for 8 breaths here, okay? And then observe your breathing. Now, for those of you who are more flexible, you can always come down with your head resting on your forearms or the back of your hands, right? So the lower you bring your chest towards the ground, the deeper the stretch will be, right? Just make sure that you, like I said, you can force yourself to go into it, but is that necessary, right? Is that what you're looking for to form a shape or to get the stretch? If it is to get the stretch, make sure that you're not pushing yourself too hard too soon and you're fully feeling the stretch and not the strain, right? So work towards it gradually, right? Hold it there. As long as you're breathing fully and deeply, not holding your breath or shallow breathing in order to hold the pose, it's a good limit to work with. Okay, very slowly coming on back. We'll work with one last one here now, right? So let's have your feet come in closer towards one another. So this is what we call a butterfly, okay? One of those things that happens to runners a lot. And I feel it also. It's a lot of strain or pressure to the hip joint, right? So over here, I'm gonna hold onto my feet. I'm gonna butterfly my legs out. So I actually pull my heels quite close towards me already. And if you're very, very tight around the inner thighs, you probably feel the stretch occurring here already, okay? And let's stop. If you're okay to go further, the elbows are going to press down on your lower legs, your calves, and you're going to bring your chest closer towards your feet as well. By now, many of you will feel that stretch across your quads also, front of your thighs. That's a very overutilized muscle in runners. You're going to feel the inner thigh is stretching as well. And the lower you go, the deeper the stretch, right? But let's try to keep the knees close to the ground while doing so, right? So you may want to use your elbows to press down on your calves to prevent the knees from floating up, right? Same thing, hold it for about 8 to 10 breaths, and then very slowly coming back up. So there you have it, some simple stretches that you can do if you're an avid runner, or even if you're running just 2 to 3 times a week, right? These are stretches that you ought to do, okay, as part of your running regime, okay? And you may do it every single day, not necessarily just after you run, but do it, okay? Because it will help you to be able to sustain a much longer running journey and to sustain less repetitive strain as well. Thank you so much once again for joining myself and Sports Singapore for Yoga for Runners. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye bye.